of Hindustan Times Shine HR Conclave. It is my privilege to welcome you here today, and I acknowledge all of you for taking out the time to be a part of this evening. The topic for today's discussion is employee investments beyond annual increments. In today's challenging business and economic ecosystem, organizations are continuously rethinking on employee-employer relation and leaving no stone unturned to achieve workforce engagement and motivation. It's the age of millennials, a new generation of employees who will account for the 75% of the workforce by 2025. And research shows that they are not motivated only by money. They are attracted to employers who can offer more than merely good salaries, a culture beyond just increments. The 40th Hindustan Times Shine HR Conclave, Gurgaon edition, poses the following questions to HR leaders. Can only the increments and salary hikes stimulate employees' development and companies' growth? What offerings are required to be made to keep this dynamic race of the millennials motivated and engaged, apart from increments? Are we sure that the good old tools of employee benefits have been leveraged properly and successfully implemented? Is it the time to redefine these benefits to make it more meaningful for the millennials than what has been traditionally offered? Ladies and gentlemen, we have the privilege of having amongst us some very prominent individuals from the HR fraternity who are here to share their views on this topic. We move on to our panel discussion now. Our first panelist for the conclave is Sameer Khanna, VP and Head of Human Resources, Region India, Ericsson. Sameer joined Ericsson as the Head of Human Resources for Region India in September 2012. As the Head of HR, his primary focus is to oversee the entire HR function and specifically HR consulting, training and development, project management, performance management, global rollouts, compensation and benefits, recruitment and employee engagement. Sameer has been around in the industry for over 2 decades now and has worked with many companies such as JLL, Logica and Hewitt Associates. Welcome, sir. Please join us on stage. Our next speaker for the conclave is Amit Malik, Chief People Officer, Aviva Life Insurance. In his current role, Amit has the responsibility for strengthening HR business partnership, building a dynamic, vibrant culture, and instilling a sense of pride and ownership in employees' actions. Amit has over 17 years of work experience, and prior to joining Aviva, he worked in HR leadership roles at Bank of America, Royal Bank of Scotland, American Express, and GlaxoSmithKline Consumer Healthcare. Amit graduated with a Bachelor of Engineering degree and is a management graduate in human resource from Symbiosis Institute of Business Management, Pune. Amit is also an alumnus of Cornell University and Oxford University. Amit was awarded Top 40 HR Leaders at the Asia Pacific HR Conference 2014. Welcome, sir. It's an honor to have you here. Moving on to our next panelist, Dr. Bibek Banerjee, Dean and Head of Academics, Bridge School of Management. Dr. Banerjee is acknowledged widely as an innovation-driven institution builder in India. Dr. Banerjee joined Bridge School from the Institute of Management Technology, Ghaziabad, where he was the director and academic mentor of Group IMT India. Previously, he was at the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, where he spent 18 years as Professor of Marketing and Economics. Dr. Banerjee's business consulting experience include engagements with several national and multinational organizations with Ericsson, Coca-Cola, the Aditya Birla Group, Genpact, Microsoft, the Citigroup, Infosys, Tata Group, Unilever India, HDFC Bank, TVS Group, etc. Request you to join us on stage, sir. Thank you for being a part of this panel. Our moderator for the panel discussion is Calvin Lindo. Calvin is Chief Human Resource Officer at Lenskart.com, an omni-channel business with objective to revolutionize and organize the widely unorganized eyewear market in the country. He has 17 years of HR experience spanning internet, e-commerce, FMCG, and telecom industries. With 14 years of rich line experience and 3 years of developmental HRD and OD experience. He has held various HR leadership roles in Nokia and Kimberly-Clark Lever. He is passionate about leadership and talent and helping scale businesses from scratch through insightful and impactful HR practices. Thank you for being here, sir. Please join us on stage. Can we have a big round of applause for the panel, please? The two other panelists, Mr. Prem Singh and Ratna Singh, did not make it to the conclave because they had to face some personal emergency. They have regretted for not being a part of this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, we will also have a question and answer session after the panel discussion. May I request Calvin to take the discussion forward? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ivan. You've made a very detailed introduction for all of us. So we have a very distinguished panel over here. It's my job to ensure that at least we keep talking, we at least add value to the conversation. It was planned to be for 1.5 hours, but I think it makes more sense to make it much more engaging that we have a conversation for about 1 hour and leave a lot of questions and answers, because if only all of us talk, it makes no sense. Okay, so we really want to hear from you towards the end of it all. Okay, so the topic over here is investments beyond annual increments, and I think it's a very good time for us, a very opportune time, because I think we're all going through the appraisal cycles. So I want to do a very quick survey amongst all of us over here. How many of you have finished your appraisal cycles? Hands up, really high. How many of you have got your appraisal letters, your increment letters? Very nice. How many of you are extremely satisfied with your increment letters? One person. Wow. Two.
That question means That question means delighted with the increment letters. And we are videotaping all this, going back to your organizations, just to be clear.
And now the camera will come. How many of you are extremely dissatisfied with your increments? One guy.
After
right.
I said videotaping, his number has reduced.
Okay. So great, guys. I think it is a very opportune time for us to have a conversation, because it's investments beyond the increments. And I think organizations think they've done their best. They've had a great year, or they've not had a great year. They've done their benchmarking with companies from the industry. And they've handed you the letters. Most of you are very happy. Most of you are very unhappy as well. So they were done and dusted. We're done with the process. But I think more importantly is, how do organizations engage beyond the increments and the increases? And I think the demands from the workforce nowadays is, what more can the company do to us? Okay? And in today's VUCA world, complex dynamics, organizations are understanding that for them to be relevant, they need to have an engaged workforce. Because you have an engaged workforce, when good times come, they show high performance. When bad times come, they stay on with you in the organization. There's a financial implication, of course, to an engaged workforce. So research has shown that for every 5% increase in the engagement scores of an organization, there is a 3% increase in revenue in the subsequent year. Okay? And therefore, it's very, very important for us to understand and to find ways in which we build a very engaged workforce. So my first question here to the very, very distinguished panel over here is, how do you create a culture of engagement? Okay? So, and I want to hear, openly from what you think is the best way for us to create a culture of engagement in the respective organizations. So, Amit, any thoughts?
Well, as they say, from an engagement perspective, it's everyone's own definition of engagement, right? Like we saw, everyone's been satisfied with their salary letters. But two things that really go on from creating a culture is, I think one is as you build a listening organization, that you listen more.
Okay.
And then you follow it up with a value that we have in Aviva, which is called care more. So you listen, and then you care more not only to be empathetic towards listening, but care more towards acting on it, care more towards communicating with people. And
Okay.
if you build these pillars up, that's where you start to engage with people, to say, we listened to you, we heard you, we could do, we couldn't do, and communicate back on that, because that closes the loop about it. I think that's where the engagement starts to come in. That's where the trust starts to build in, to say, in an organization, there is someone who will listen to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always about doing. It's not always about saying yes, we would do it, or agreeing. But it's that whole culture, and that's where we'd start the culture of engagement from. And then take it up to how you walk the talk and leadership, and what you do from communicating of the strategy and involving and being fair and meritocratic. But all that comes later, from starting to listen. And I think that's the strongest pillar that you have to build an engagement culture.
So your pillar is listening. You start listening first. Yeah. Okay. What do you have to say, Sunny?
So I completely agree with that. I think listening is a key one. It reminds me of, if I take an example from my childhood days, and how my parents engaged me, in a way, as a child, how did they engage? So I think in class 8, I was in Delhi. My father's from the Air Force, so we traveled around, but 8th onwards we were in Delhi. I was very keen to go by DTC bus. And this was in late 80s. I don't know how many of you would resonate. Has anyone over here traveled by DTC bus? Okay, so quite a lot. Okay, so we'll understand. So I was very keen that, I don't want to do school bus. I want to do DTC bus. I want to go by DTC bus. Why? Okay. And so my parents kind of sat me down, they spoke to me. They did exactly what you said. I mean, they heard me out. They said, look, you're still a kid, class 8, take another year, because there are some social norms, security, safety, which was important even in late 80s. Not so much, but still important. But why did I want to go by DTC bus? Because it provided me flexibility. I had like an all-route pass. Everyone's heard of that pass? Yeah?
That was school,
That was school time.
or was it college?
School time, school time.
Because when I was in college, I made sure that there was a staff thing, right? You just show that badge.
Yeah, that's right. We have a few years between us.
Okay.
So,
Go on. Okay.
so that was a school time. And in class 9th, I was like, okay, so now I moved to class 9th, and my parents heard me, and they said, okay, fine. I think the key thing is not only listening, also involving, talking. And I think it's the same with employees as well. Listening, hearing, but involving them as well. Be a part of the journey. Why? What can happen? Provide the flexibility. That DTC pass gave me the flexibility. I still went to school and came back home. I didn't go anywhere. And I'm in front of video camera. I tell you the absolute truth. I did not go too many places. No, I did not go to Chanakya or PVR. That time those were some of the cinema hall. But it provided me the freedom and just the thought that I have the freedom and the flexibility.
Okay.
I may or may not use it. I think it's the same with employees. Active listening, and I just qualify that listening with active listening. Active listening is when you're really, really, really listening. Because you could be listening to me over here, but how many of you are actually thinking, oh yeah, and that's really the active listening when you're applying it to your organizations.
Okay.
Active listening, involving, and then giving the flexibility and the freedom to work. From an organization's perspective, we also need to understand a few more things. For instance, manager plays a big role as well. So how do we not only engage with the employees, but also at the same time engage with the managers? And I think if we are able to do this and capture it and then be honest and truthful about it, I think we typically would have people who would at least trust and be more engaged with the organization.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. I'd give Vivek an opportunity.
Okay, I must share with your permission, with the audience over here, our backroom conversation. That I represent the academic world, and Calvin, in our backroom conversation, gave me all the license to be as provocative and as whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
so I'll take you up on that offer.
There'll be limits, though.
There'll be limits, of course. I've been in the gig for a while. So I represent the academia, and to your question, Calvin, I just want to personalize it. My answer is as much as Sanjeev has, Samir. That I remember after my PhD in the US, I came back and joined IIM Ahmedabad in the faculty. And that was a long, long time ago. Don't go by the color of my hair. But then in my journey, especially in the initial journeys of working with a lot of you guys from the industry to create L&D programs, which would have some form of engagement or the other as an outcome that the client side was looking at. And I cannot but help remember my late 90s experience with Hindustan Levers, where we built a program which was called the Business Education Program, which was a long duration program where people would come and spend time on the campus. And one of the chosen outcomes was, of course, engagement, but the other was also strategic retention. And it was amazing that after a few years, that program was stopped. Guess why? Because a lot of the guys who attended the program went on to write the CAT and GMAT exam and found a way out of the organization. Okay, so clearly we dug that a little bit in the sense that quite clearly they were not engaged enough in the organization. And late night was very prestigious to be in. Of course, Levers being a fantastic organization when it comes to training and development, a wonderful nursery for leadership. And we figured that there was certainly some form of engagement missing for the younger people. And I know, Calvin, you're going to come to millennial later on this thing, but in the evening. And one of the things that sort of came out was precisely the absence of what you were talking about, that is there enough freedom for you to choose to coexist in an organization and yet do things that you're passionate about doing. This was the late 90s, of course, but early 2000. But I think one, of course, is the listening part. But what we find is that ability for an organization to engage an employee to sort of own up to the organization at the same time, kind of maintain a sense of the self in a manner that is balanced is something that at that time probably it wasn't happening in the and therefore we could there were many tactical elements that were put in, but as we rightly said, like especially today, we are talking about the perhaps the top talent not wanting to be owned by an organization and wanting to they want to own themselves. So this issue of ownership is central to the engagement, and we perhaps some organizations do better in instilling the sense of ownership.
Okay, so I'll just shift from there, shifting gears. So I'm sure engagement, when I talk to people, what are your focus for this year? Okay, CEOs are concerned, and they realize that, it's their responsibility to drive engagement. And I know that in your perspective, when I ask your focus areas, I'm very sure that engagement is a priority for you for this year. And you are HR leaders for your organization, right? So what do you think is the role of a leader? So there's leadership and there's culture. So what's the role of a leader over here in shaping the culture and in driving engagement for the organization? Any thoughts?
Go ahead. So I think first of all, the leader needs to understand himself or herself as well.
Yeah.
I think it starts with. Sorry if it's getting a bit like basics, but I'll tell you. I think it's also your self-awareness, your self-style, how you are, how do you relate to, what's your learning style, what is your most optimum style, what are your strengths, what are your, it's like cliched, the standard question in the interview, what's your strengths, what's your weakness? It is cliched, but it's extremely important as well, because each one of us are supposed to do that introspection and kind of say, okay, this is what I stand. Because once you're able to do that, you're able to relate, and then you're able to relate to what other people bring on board. Because one of the things that we emphasize is we value a diversity, and diversity is not just limited to some of the things in terms of gender or age or social status. It actually goes far beyond in terms of diversity of thought. And for you to be able to really bring the best out of the team, you should be able to understand how to utilize that diversity and bring it. Okay. Otherwise, diversity can be often misused, because you have to really, there's no point of having a diverse team if you do not work with them well and get the best along with them. So I think, and then I think is a slight shift in terms of what we call managing people to engaging people. Because I think managing people is a bit of the past, and I'm glad you said leadership rather than just manager, because I think as you move towards leader, it goes far beyond in terms of really how do you drive people and get them to move ahead. So I think it's a basic thing. I think at a very core is the basic nicety. You have to be, call me really simple about this, but you have to be a nice human being. And if you're a nice human being, I think it makes life much easier for your teams that work with you, and hence it makes life much easier for the organizations that work with you.
Simplistic perspective you're giving here. Yeah.
Just to build on being nice, I think as I look at a leader, I think we are a distributed organization, and that's a challenge for us, because if you have 120 branches spread all across, how do you make sure that that whole tenet of the culture, being a good leader, is actually manifesting day in and day out for us in a branch? So if I have a branch in Angul in Orissa, how do I make sure that the branch manager is kind of living that whole piece about leader? Because so how we see it is that leader is the owner of that microsystem. And he's the one, he or she is the one who shapes it, because for that employee in that branch in Orissa, that is Aviva.
Agreed.
That is what we stand for. And that's where leadership comes in, and it plays a very important role. Building on to what Samir said about being nice and being there, I think it's a lot about being authentic. Because if the leader is authentic, that is where the leader is manifesting the values that you espouse as an organization.
So thanks. I think that's very, very, that point where you say the leader, even in that smallest town, he shows the examples of leadership, and that's the first level of engagement.
Yeah.
Because, the question I was going to ask is, leaders are the ones who lead in driving engagement. And in the conversations that we have is you have engaging leaders, but I think more importantly for organizations, you need to have engaged leadership and engaging leadership. And when I'm saying that, I mean this critical mass of leadership who basically ensure that engagement is part and parcel of their daily lives in their words and actions. So, wanted to pick your thoughts on that. So thanks for that. Now, I'll come and I'll shift gears slightly. In your industry, okay, what do you think are the top engagement drivers? Okay, and specifically, if you can give examples in your particular organization, what is it that you've done uniquely to engage, in your industry and in your organization? So, for example, in your industry, it's a lot of fleet on street, and I've heard these scary, the numbers, your attrition numbers are scary. And when I heard that, it shook me a little bit. But what do you do, and how do you extend engagement? Exactly, you gave me an example earlier, but what do you do?
For us, if you look at it, the industry benchmark says our feet on street is roughly attrition is at 80-82%, which is industry-wide.
That's
right?
huge.
So we expect people to leave. But what you want to focus is, when you leave, we made a difference. We made you a little better when you leave. That could be on your learning, that could be on your health and well-being, that could be on you as a professional. We've made a difference. So that's where we start from, because we can't wish that whole animal away, to say that. So if you look at us, and how we would take those pillars to say, you would absolutely look at your own health and well-being to say you come in as a whole to the organization, and how we then give you an experience. I'll give you an example of what we do is, something like, while a lot of people do yoga and, and all that prenatal and stuff like that, we'd give you an opportunity to say wherever you are, we'd give you a doctor on call. So wherever you are, we do that from a health and well-being perspective. But more open, on a more engagement driver, it's about flexibility and choice that we provide, which we think would help us differentiate in the space that we operate in.
So flexibility and choice,
and
meaning?
choice to build your career with us.
Okay.
For you to be able to say, this is the place where I want to build my career, and I have the flexibility and the choice. For example, when I joined Aviva almost 3.5, 4 years back, and I started to, you kind of go around wanting to understand the pulse of the organization, there was this whole thing about saying, I want to build my career. And my challenge to everybody was, if you want to build your career, how locationally mobile you are. Because if I have 2 branches in a city, then you can only, if you want to remain in that city, then you can only grow as much. How willing are you? And with the number of attrition that we have, there are vacancies which are always there. And you list that out. And how did that manifest back is, we went back and we changed our whole relocation policy. We made it very, very cutting edge to say, let's give the flexibility to the employee, let's give the choice to the employee. So we cashed it out to say, you want to move, we'll give you an X number of, we'll give you 100,000 rupees, you decide how you want to do. We kind of look at the problem and say, well, the thing that came out was kids' education. We said, we'll support you on kids' education. We'll pay the school fee when you come in. We'll do that part. So that's flexibility and choice, what you want to do with that money, how you want to spend it. That was one part. We started to look at career and say, if you need to relocate, you need to be able to skill yourself for a job. So we linked that back up to say, how do you then skill yourself? IJPs and all is a policy which is easy and good things to do. We started to skill that up to say, we want you to go and study. So obviously there is the study leave that comes in, but more important than giving the study leave was the study policy for money was giving them the leave to do.
So when you're saying all of these things, how is that translated? So what do you see as an outcome from the employee side?
So you see a lot more of them now willing to first equip themselves.
Yeah.
So now in our organization, if you want to go to study, you can crowdsource leave. There is a leave donation where you can ask people to donate leaves to you. So that whole piece saying, if I have 30 days of leave and if I spend 25 days doing a course, what do I do with my family? That whole piece is out because you start to crowdsource leave. You can get people to donate you leave and you get that piece. So that's taken care of.
And is that actively
Yes.
absorbed by the employees?
Yes, so I'll tell you, when I presented it to the leadership team, people said no one's going to donate leave in Aviva, and we had the first donation on the 3rd day of the launch of the policy. We have 4 life cycles in studies, one of them that I'm taking an example of, but we have 4 life cycles where you can do that. So that started to work. The whole concept that I can move in and go to a different place is, as we look at it after almost 2 years, 2.5 years of going on this journey, now we recognize that we have to build the second part of the story, which is what we tell the employee to say, we are okay for you to move, but you can also come back. And I think that's the loop that we now need to close as an organization, and we have to venture into that phase to say, how do you come back? to the state. So if you are in Bangalore and you move to, say, Gujarat, or you move to Gurgaon, if you want to go back after 2 years to Bangalore, are we able to close that loop? And that's the next stage of journey that we have to undertake ourselves.
So it somehow still falls within the flexibility and choice
Yes,
as well. So it takes
flexibility
its own loop.
flexibility
Okay.
and choice.
Thanks. What about you? Your industry is a different industry.
Yeah, so I think if you look at from an employee's perspective, the
Yeah.
key thing is the total rewards. What's in it for me, and what's in it for me is going beyond compensation, benefits, to rewards and recognition, to work-life choices, performance management, and talent development, which can be career development as well. So I think those are the broad attributes, if I say that an employee says that I want. And I think the key thing in building in terms of listening is we do crowdsourcing of policies as well. So when we have to work on certain policies and we ask them. So we run various campaigns where we run something called I Am Empowered. So, we go to employees and ask them, okay, in these areas and any other area that you can think of, what is it that you want? Pick up some of the strands. So one of the things came that, look, our dress code is there, which is Monday to Thursday formal and Friday, which is informal. And a lot of the people said, why can't we have that changed? So we crowdsourced that, went to employees and asked them. Can you imagine in our crowdsourcing, what did people say? Whether they want to be dressed formally or informally? Any guesses? Yeah, most of them came back and said, we want to be dressed formally. But we want flexibility to be able to dress informally as well. So our policy is very simple now, dress as appropriate. So it's the flexibility is with you in terms of how you want to dress. I think the other key thing, and coming from authenticity is, and when I say dress is appropriate, so they know that when they have to go and meet clients, they know how to dress. Because the key thing with it is to have that trust. I think there's a very old the theory X, theory Y, and we all studied it, but we still tend to a lot of times use our policies as theory X rather than moving on to theory Y and treating employees as adults, as people who know what is right for how they're supposed to behave. They know. So time of incoming, outgoing, we really don't have it. We do have a turnstile. I think the important thing, either one of us speaks as an audience, because I've sat there many years, is to understand the context in which one is applying. So when I'm talking of Ericsson, it's a technology company, very high on innovation. And in that context, now, if I give you that, we have turnstile, but we don't really say who is coming, what time. If Calvin comes in at 8 o'clock, 6 o'clock, or 9 o'clock, we really don't, it doesn't matter. Why? Because it's not input driven, but it's just output driven performance that we are measuring right now. So it's really not input driven. You do have a badge and you do swipe, but that's needed because A, for security reason, because we are knowledge based, so we need to just ensure that knowledge security, and B, for employee safety as well, because in case of any hazard, we need to know how many employees are inside or outside. So some of those contexts we need to understand and say, hey, what's the flexibility that we can give? Similarly, in terms of working from home, or in terms of similar things like training. When we have people going even for expensive training, we don't have bonds. And when we did crowdsourcing, the managers came back and said, we should have a bond for people who go out for expensive training. And I said, look, that's against the values. So, if you trust an employee, you want the employee to be engaged, not to be bonded. And that's why I said, look, and so at times you listen to crowdsourcing, but then you decide what you want to do as a larger culture of the company. She said, if trust is our theme, then I don't want to really have bonds for the employee's expensive training. The employee, if he or she is, and we expect them to be mature enough, will decide themselves. And that to me, that gentleman or gentlewomanly promise is far bigger than any bond that can hold employees.
Can I just add a small anecdote to the dress code policy that Sameer said? We just launched our dress code policy on 8th of April, and which is we are a financial services company. We wear ties and suits every day. We're very proud of that. We were very proud of that at one point in time. So we were in this global HR conference and we said we want to be fintech, right? We want to be a fintech organization and move. And everyone said the dress code is something that comes in. And we were talking about it to say, why can't we do away with ties and stuff like that? And like you said, we'd wear jeans and t-shirt to work and round neck and polo neck. And someone challenged us and said, well, it won't get accepted in the markets. The CEOs won't accept it. They won't sign it. So my global head of HR stood up and said, as long as people wear something and come, why should we be worried? I'd be worried if they don't wear anything and come. And we offered to do test and learn in India, and when I presented that new policy to my CEO, he said, I like the policy, but what's your end vision? I said, my vision is people come in slip-ons and shorts at some point in time, but we'll live with T-shirts and jeans today.
Very, very interesting.
So just related to that, I had a tough time in changing my own thinking on this. And, I've worked for over 2 decades. I had a tough time to wear jeans on a non-Friday. So even after introducing the policy, it took me a few weeks to really apply it to myself and say that, hey, I can, because you get used to your own mindsets, and then you kind of say, okay.
So it's interesting. So firstly, I want to know, do you wear a tie in the office?
No, I don't.
You don't wear a tie?
I chose to wear one today.
So you're,
I was telling,
you're appropriately attired for this
no,
flexibility.
so my wife now says that I spend more time deciding my wardrobe in the morning than when I wore suits, because it was very canned. I knew what to wear every day.
Makes a lot of sense. And coming to the attire, so I work for a startup. And I don't believe in having a dress code because I think it's a free place, right? As you're saying, appropriately, dress appropriately. But it's funny that I think when you have people who come with a certain perspective, exactly what you're saying, where you need to convince yourself to transition or to shift to that informal wear, because we know what our DNA is, but we do have influencers within the organization who have a point of view of what you should wear, what you should not wear. And I think sometimes it's actually managing and transitioning that mindset of some people, even for attire. And it all adds up to the culture of the organization. It all adds up to the way that we connect and therefore engage with our employees. I'll come to you, and you're from the, I was asking examples from the organizations where they work with. So for you, how have educational institutions partnered with the industry in really bringing engagement within the organizations? It was a long question I've asked, but I hope you'd be able to.
That's a very loaded question.
Yeah, succinctly present it to us. Yeah.
Okay, you said education institution. I'm interpreting that a little narrowly as business schools.
Yes, business schools.
So, because education institutions are broader, and I would, in India, the business schools, most of you know, is structurally a little different from where we have taken the models from, which is typically the US or the UK, where the management schools are a part of a university system. So you would have a Kellogg within Northwestern University, or you would have a Sloan School within MIT. So there would be multiple disciplines in a university, which is a broader ecosystem, and within that there's going to be a business school. And a business school, it is a fairly clinical school in a sense that, of course, you have the geeky stuff of operations research and analytics, which is very algorithmic. But then you have a lot of practice, clinical things, especially in organization behavior, HR, et cetera, right? So business school had traditionally been sort of like a synthetic, like an amalgamation of multiple influences. From psychology, from engineering, from math, stat, etc. In India, and I would restrict my answer to the Indian context, Calvin.
Yeah, so I think,
in India, business schools have been standalone. I mean, if you know the IIM's structure, including ISB, the new schools, my own school that we're trying to build, are standalone entities, and they are not parts of university. So therefore, the resource base that they can sort of appeal to or sort of invoke is relatively limited. So over time, what has happened because of that, and of course there are new models which are sort of challenging it, is that over time, fortunately or unfortunately, the business schools have been has been seen as largely a supplier of human resources to the industry. Okay, so I would say that largely about 80% of the engagement with the industry for business schools have been, I would say, would be for as a supplier of talent at multiple levels. Okay, largely at the entry level, but now you have a few programs which is giving you mid-career talent source. There's, I would say, about maybe 15% engagement, especially with the top schools, with respect to L&D and training of whether they're very domain specific or leadership or analytics. Things that are, new age. I would say about maybe 15% engagement would be from the supply side, how many business schools would your companies work with in India? Like I would say handful, right? And I think it's a very small minority of schools or firms who are looking at business schools as a source of research, okay? Like by way of, there are many questions we have in our day-to-day operations in our lives that we don't have answers for, and number two.
So are you saying that therefore now industry needs to reach out to you?
As much as, well, I mean, what I'm saying is that I think both sides have their own orthodoxies, right? So you have this model of business schools who sit in wonderful villages like Ahmedabad and Jamshedpur and Hyderabad and things like that, right? Calvin is an ex-LRI guy. Right? And of course, they have their own business of, that's an industry unto itself, and they have their own business of going about doing, churning out that 80% PGDMs or MBAs or whatever.
Yeah.
On the industry side, you guys have the, you guys are answerable to your stakeholders, right? So the whole issue of engagement, and as I was saying before, that to me, a large part of engagement is perhaps a symbiosis between, industry and academia. And I think in India, we probably are at a very nascent stage of scraping the top. And a large, I mean, I would take, being representing the academia, I would take the blame onto myself in the sense that it has been inflexible, the models, okay? Like if you want to engage, send your students to Jamshedpur, send your students to Ahmedabad, and we all know unplugging a workforce from operations for even 5 days becomes very, very difficult. But I think we are very hopeful at Bridge. What we are trying to do, for example, and I will do my sales pitch, Calvin. Thanks for the permission. In the sense that have the schools been flexible enough to engage, and I think largely a very brick and mortar model has come in the way of being that flexible. Professors or thought leaders would engage. I mean, they only have about 20% of their available time to engage with the industry. They have other things to do, teach, do research, etc. But with digitization, I think there is an opportunity. And there are interesting schools, who are trying to look at that platform. We talked about MOOCs before, and I think with a blend of online and face-to-face mentorship, I think new models will emerge. So to answer your question bluntly, I think we have been less than innovative and creative in the past to work symbiotically with the
So there's a lot of
industry.
effort both from the B schools and from the organizations.
I would
Or is it more from the B schools towards the organizations?
Well, I think given the genesis of what I just said, that B schools having been dependent on the industry for the large time, I think the effort is a lot from that side. I think the fire has more lux there. On the other side, Calvin, from my experience, a lot of the companies would talk to us saying that, hey, we don't want a generic program, but can you customize something for me? So Amit, you would say that, can you, I have this very specific problem, and you talked about flexibility and choice, right? Can I work with you? Can the academia work with, if your employee moves, can the education move with him? So if you're doing a program, can the education move with him? And that's a supply side challenge, right? So, and if I'm on a very brick and mortar, very campus-based program, and of course traveling, etc., as is an impediment. But is there possible ways to innovate to make the education move with the person, give them more flexibility, make the flexibility more richer?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of work which we need to do, and maybe we'll have to catch up and figure out ways in which we can really bridge this gap.
Just to finish that, Calvin, when you're trying to customize, what is very important is for us to understand that customization requires investment from both sides. So just like we have to understand your needs, but as you are running the business on a day-to-day basis, you have to spend time and investment in sort of bringing your context alive to us so that the customization can happen. So a lot of the times, in the industry, while customization is desirable, there's not adequate investment or people don't want to pay for customization. So I think both sides have work to do.
So we hear you, and we'll do our best. Okay.
Look forward.
Yeah. We were talking about the drivers of engagement right now. So typically when you ask people, okay, across demographics right now, they say that the drivers of engagement is career, is pay, and is reputation, the top three drivers. So in your experience, which one do you think really takes prominence over here? Or is it a mix of all of the three? Because for me, a person needs to see growth, he needs to be rewarded equitably, and there should be a pride of association with the organization. And that's a true sense of engagement that the person has. So in your experience, what do you think for you is a 1, 2, and 3? Or is it a combination of 3 from what you've seen? So career progression, pay, and reputation.